So our vision at Medcast is to improve healthcare delivery in Australia and around the world. Our focus is high quality blended social learning, so we're going to talk more about the social side of it. But before we get into that, I'm just going to give you a little opportunity. I'm not judging you, but it is after lunch. If you need to have a little power snooze during the afternoon sometime, I have been known to do that myself. I'm just going to give you a little roadmap of what we're going to talk about, so you can be judicious about when you zone out. And at the end, I'll have some take-homes. So I was considering bringing a whistle to blow it at that point that we're at the take-homes, but my wife thought that was too much, so I'm just going to tone it down. So I'm going to talk about why we've got such a passion for health education and kind of why it matters. What the value of primary care systems is and how education can really drive that value. I'm going to talk about the importance of social learning and a bit of a framework for implementing social learning. We'll have a look at some real life implementations and case studies of some of the things we've been doing, and then we'll get to the take-home messages. So the first thing I do and ask to do a speech like this is Googling the top 10 tips for keynote speeches, and they suggest things like it has to be a quote, it has to be funny, and it should be by somebody famous. But being a GP, I'm not really very good at following prescriptive guidelines, so I thought I'd choose 1 out of 3 of those and go with that. And this is a quote from one of our students who, at the end of my PhD studies where we did an implementation trial, I'd spent 4 years looking at the role of social learning communities, which we'll talk about more, on overcoming isolation for rural and regional GP trainees. And this trainee, when we sent out the survey, they're just like your little solid gold person who sends back, "Oh, thank you, they got it." So the online community allows us to know what the other trainees are doing. We learn from each other and from our educators. It makes me feel connected to my peers and not isolated in one practice. And it makes me feel supported if I've got questions or difficult cases. I know I'll always get a reply from somebody. Boom, is what I thought. 4 years of a PhD, they've got it. Finally. But you might be wondering what that has got to do with Yucatan midwives. And I'm glad you asked, but you'll have to wait a little longer. First, I'd like to talk about the scale of the problem and the problem of scale. To paraphrase Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Australia is really, 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 really big, as mentioned before. It's also really, 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 really empty outside of most of the large regional centres. But you actually do have to still deliver healthcare out there. There are health services, there are health needs. The needs of the population are higher. Mortality and morbidity are significantly higher in regional areas. You don't really want to get cancer outside of a big regional centre because you'll die significantly sooner. So there's isolation both of the health providers, there's isolation of training, how to get training out to these areas. There's a huge geography to overcome. Problems with retention, good studies to show that health professionals, even if they rotate through these areas, one of the major issues is professional isolation, which means they eventually leave again. Added to that is the complexity of the training needed. It's not enough just to send out a guideline and say, here you go, do one of them. That's in my Australian accent. I still can't get the Kiwi thing, and I'm not going to embarrass myself. So they need some know-how, not just some know-what. They need tacit knowledge. They need, okay, I've got the know-what. The guideline says, sure, I should add in drug A when your sugar gets to 10. But what if they're really old? Or what if they're young? Or what if they're obese or indigenous or they've got renal failure? These are the real-world decisions which actually slow you down in terms of clinical decisions all the time, and that's what the trainees, and even in our lifelong journey of learning, that's what trips you up and stops you. You can spout the 5 facts of what you should do, but when you've actually got to do it, it's the know-how which is the key part. And the story gets better. Demand is actually going up even further. So not only you've got all these barriers to overcome with the geography, the population's ageing. Health demands are going up. Not only are the population ageing, but the trainers are ageing. The average GP trainer in Australia is a 55-year-old GP. It doesn't take you long to figure out how long when they're going to fall off the wagon. And then let's look at the problem internationally. 400,000. That's the number of GPs that China is trying to train by the early 2020s. Like, The number is just mind-boggling. Let alone India is doing the same. Even the US is concerned that it does not have the capacity to keep up with the training needs to train health professionals for its own internal health delivery. 127,617. It's a very specific number. But this is the number that is estimated if you added one trained GP to a population 1 in 10,000 across the US, so this is in a developed country, the number of lives you would save. So Barbara Starfield is a fantastic primary care researcher. This data has been replicated around the world. You add a single primary care physician to a population of 10,000, you lower mortality. Interestingly, if you add a specialist, you mostly increase mortality. Just saying. It's because they're dealing with much smaller populations of very sick people. So people run into the primary care system very often. They run 5 times a year approximately in Australia. They go and see a GP. And it's very cheap. GP items claimed in Australia is about 6% of the Australian health budget. Hospitals are very expensive places to administer primary care. They're fantastic places to administer complex care. So, we've got a whole bunch of problems here. We know primary care works, and not just motherhood statements about it's really important, but really good hard data. In first world countries, the population is ageing and health demands are going up. In developing countries, there's a rising middle class and demand for healthcare. And a lot of them just don't have primary care systems yet, and they're suddenly realising that having a hospital clinic with a kilometre of queue down the road for people to get into it is really not sustainable. We've got massive geography to overcome and limited resources, both financial and the human resources, to deliver this training. And not only that, there's a complexity around the training that's needed. We really need to be getting tacit knowledge transfer, not just the know what or explicit knowledge. Of course, particularly in a room like this, we'll be thinking, e-learning, that's what we've got to do. And of course, but what sort? Like, e-learning is a really big bucket. How do you make that happen? What are some practical steps to do that? What's a bit more theory around it? What are some practical business and technical steps? And I'm going to go through a little bit of that now. Most importantly, I know you want to know what that has to do with Yucatan midwives. And now I'm really glad you did ask. Yucatan midwives are effectively a trade craft group in Mexico. Traditional midwifery, offering antenatal care services, really through oral tradition, working on a master and apprentice model, passing down this traditional care to offer quite effective services. Most importantly, these midwives, US naval quartermasters and supermarket butchers, were the 3 groups originally studied by Laven Wenger, who came up with formalising master and apprentice learning. So it's kind of what we do in healthcare, master and apprentice, we all get that, but they formalised it into these communities of practice. And the best of their definitions just describes communities of practice as groups of people who share a common concern or passion for something that they do and get better at it by interacting regularly. And the key points of that are really important. So they're groups, they've got a common shared need and knowledge need, and they're interacting regularly to get better. And that so well describes how, particularly in health we learn, but a lot of adult education is like that. It's really the basis of one of the main social learning theories. But the question I had was, how do we replicate this online? Can this overcome isolation? Interestingly, as an aside, during our studies, we found that some of the urban GP trainees were more isolated than their regional and rural counterparts because they were working in little clinics, fairly unsupported, and not really exposed to much support. So understanding about a bit of a theoretical framework was the start, but then we wanted to know, could it work? And as so often happens, you look around in your silo and you look around in your silo, and then you look over the fence and you realise somebody else has done all that work and it's fantastic. And so in the business literature, Probst and Porcillo did this fantastic study of 57 big communities of practice, face-to-face and online, big companies like Mitsubishi and Siemens and Caterpillar, and they basically said, oh, works. Hard outcomes, lower cost of delivery, faster innovation cycles, quicker time to market. The way business does that stuff. In health, we're often find it much harder to get some of those measures in there. But so they'd done that work, and they'd come up with this really nice framework. They call it, the reasons why these communities succeed and why they fail. I thought that was a good place to start. So this understanding of a framework was kind of the start of a research journey for me, which has now continued on after the research. The research journey sort of started a bit like a lot of research does. You kind of get interested and you get a bit of an itch and you start to scratch it, and before you know it, the shark has jumped out of the pond and grabbed you, and you find yourself in some research track doing a PhD. Fortunately, I actually enjoyed it, which is really strange when you talk to lots of PhD people. It's meant to be really painful, and I'm still waiting for that. But no, it was amazing to have a look around what works. And rather than dragging you through the 4 years of ups and downs of that process, PhD in about 2 minutes, which is about as long as anybody really needs to know about it. The summary was that communities of practice can be replicated virtually in healthcare. They do seem to help overcoming isolation, and they improve knowledge sharing. You can build trust. It's probably better to build it in blended environments, some live and some face-to-face and some online. But interestingly, you can build trust purely online. And although I was kind of sceptical of that initial finding, you start to read some articles on that, and the articles all say, well, what about online dating? People go online, they meet somebody, they fall in love, they move internationally. The person might be a serial killer, but they've built a lot of trust before they get to that other outcome. We found a few other things. The health framework that we developed based on that business literature has been quite a useful roadmap. I'll talk about some of those steps. And the platform really needs to be easy to use, have low barriers of access, have some video, have some high quality content, have social components as well as formal learning components, and most interestingly, there was no platform available that did all that stuff when we were having a look around. Just a quick tour through the 6 steps of building online communities of practice, just in case you feel like trying this at home. And this is all published. If you want to Google this sort of stuff, we've got a bunch of articles on this. If you Google me and University of Wollongong, there are all sorts of dull, long articles you can trawl through, but here's a snapshot. It's really important to start off with a champion and support, somebody who provides leadership and vision and who's going to drive it. They don't have to be the person that's going to run it and be sitting there in the trenches day after day, but they have to have access to some kind of senior person in the organisation and access to support and funding. You need to set some clear goals. Communities of practice are relatively specific. They're about something, as we saw in that definition, a concern and passion for what you do. So it's not just swapping photos, or it's not, I want to get better at healthcare. It's something specific, like Mitsubishi, I want to get better at valve engines. Or it's, I want to improve my mental health training around depression. Or I want to pass my College of GP final exams. How do I do that? I think probably the most important question, most important step is around facilitation, and I think it's just so often overlooked. So often I talk about social learning and people go, oh, that's great, well, we'll set it up and then it will be self-sustaining. And I think there are lots of examples of these communities which grow. We see heaps of them, private groups on Facebook, and because it's about mothers and babies with GP registrars, and they've all got something to talk about. But if you're formally setting up a group for a need, like improving engine delivery or improving mental health care, you're kind of establishing a community of practice and expecting people to buy into that. It requires ongoing facilitation, which requires resourcing, and it's just important to recognise that from the outset. And facilitation can be broken into sort of clinical and course creator, content people, and the administrative people. So you need administration. They've got to help with user management. They've got to create rosters. They've got to chase down all those GPs and other educators that are mercurial and vanish all the time and don't quite appear when we say we will. And then you need the content creators to be there, sort of saying, that was a great post, thank you for that. Yes, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to clarify this discussion and bring it to a bit of a close now as to this is how we do it here. This is how we treat diabetes in this region. Because without that closure, the things just drift away. We called it a broad church of users. There's no point really having a master's and apprentice learning environment if everyone's a master or if everyone's an apprentice. There's not a lot to talk about. You need a knowledge gradient. Interestingly, it can't be too broad, because if there are a whole bunch of people that really don't know what you're talking about, it loses its focus as well. Benchmarking is great. People get online and they want to know, how do we treat diabetes here? And you want to stimulate those discussions so that everyone comes to a shared understanding of a problem. Measurement is so important for the site. Who's doing what when? And not only that, how can we feed that back to the users? One of the most effective things we find is sending out a regular newsletter roll-up, not just the automated digests out of the systems, although as they get better, hopefully they will do that, but actually just pulling things together once every week or 2 weeks to say, here are some top trending topics, here's something great that happened, this is how many of you are using our site, here's a great comment from somebody, and links back through to all the things on the site. And that's probably been the one key generator of people back to these communities. And the community and the technology, you need to be able to build that trust, ideally have video, and I just can't emphasise ease of use enough. Ease of use it actually is balanced with usefulness. So who would have thought, somebody else has done a PhD on usefulness. What's your topic? Usefulness. It's out there. But what's fascinating is they actually look at that concept and you can balance the two. So you can look at a system and look at Davy's technology acceptance model, if you want to have a look at him. And he can show that, for example, why did mobile phones take off? They weren't easy to use. They weighed like several house bricks, and you lugged them around. But gee, they were useful. So usefulness trumped ease of use. But if it's not really that useful, or it's really, really difficult to use, you run into problems. And so just keeping those two concepts in mind is really the key driver. High quality content. User-generated content is all well and good, but if you look at, once again, nice research around the 99-1 rule, so 90 people are there kind of looking around going, what have they got for me? 9 are going, maybe I'll comment. 1 person going, I've got lots to say. If you've got small groups of a community of practice of maybe 100 people, there's not a lot of people talking. But you can measure your success because maybe 90 people are still getting value, and that's where your measurement comes in. So it's not all about active people. Gee, I had 3,000 posts on my site. That might not be your metric of success. Having a regular roster of curated content and topics, that goes the admin facilitation, fitting with the content people, building out content. What are we going to do? We're going to have respiratory in week 1, we're going to run that, and then we'll have follow-up, week 3, we'll talk about gastro, let's pull in some content around this. There's stuff just feeding the thing all the time. Right, who's on this week? No, you're not on holidays. You can just answer some little messages when somebody posts something about a tricky issue in gastro or something like that. So important to have those rosters. All the while ensuring value. What's the value for the user? And particularly in health, but I think in pretty much all adult learning, people have got jobs, they've got lives, they might even have families or friends they want to see. Time is an issue. So everyone's busy and you just have to build that into how you're developing the content that's available. In health, privacy is always an issue. We tend to overcome that by having password protection and some kind of verification for the site, bearing in mind that becoming a barrier too. So actually SSO works better with systems. And just, try not to make it hard to use. So the importance of black dogs. Around 2013 or 14, I finished off my PhD, and which most importantly resulted in a ridiculous hat. It was all about the hat. Like, nobody believed in it. It really was all about the hat. It was really big and floppy and looked like something out of the goodies. But my funding ran out too, which wasn't so good. On the upside, the Black Dog Institute, which is a big mental health charity in Australia, read one of my papers and actually wanted to talk to me, which just goes to show there's nothing as practical as a good theory. And then a good mate of mine, Justin Lewis, who's one of those really useful people that understands, finance and capital and stuff, said, what if you commercialise it and then you keep on offering what we're doing without lurching from one research grant to the other? And so Midclass was born. Just a short overview of Midclass, and then we'll look at some more of the business and technical aspects around social learning. We focus on training of health professionals. It's been particularly GPs, but it's starting to broadening into some other areas now. We do some nurses and psychology and aged care and things like that. We build bespoke courses for other groups like NGOs and charities and government. We don't do pharmaceutical stuff. But we also provide increasingly a number of our own subscription courses for things like GP training. So we're providing a course to all the trainees in New South Wales now on the GP training program in their first year of training. So we do a range of that. But really the key thing and what we're sort of passionate about is this integrated social learning approach where social's at the centre. So we see that as the ongoing glue, it's the ongoing communication, it's the ongoing reason why you would keep on coming and doing learning, is that there are these ongoing discussions and peers and collaboration. And you might flow in and out of maybe a webinar, or you might go and do an e-learning module. You might want to do another e-learning module. You might do a few more and progress through to a professional certificate in something. But all the while in between that, you're drifting back and sort of seeing what other people are doing and sharing some knowledge and staying connected. So what we then had to try to do is try and figure out how to get that into a platform. Now this slide makes me feel kind of sick because I don't understand a lot of it. We've got some fantastic tech people that I work with. Firstly, the Andro team over there have been great, and we've got some excellent in-house resources. So I'm going to have a go at this, and then we'll leave it there. The thing that I take from this slide, which I didn't even put together because I wouldn't know how, our CTO put this together, is just there's lots of stuff. It's deep, isn't it? Stuff. But from a practical point of view, it just means to make this work, to make it seamless for the user, to be able to sign up to a website, to flow through to a learning management system, which we use, Totara, to flow through to social, and we're using Totara Social, to get your notifications, to have payment gateways, to track whatever is happening using Salesforce. We've really tried hard not to build anything except all the bridges. So we focus a lot on integrating systems and trying to figure out who's the best of breed in what they do. We've been through a couple of different social systems and they just didn't do what we wanted. And although Totara Social has been really early in its development path, we feel that they're sort of aligned to what we're trying to achieve, and the fact that it's integrated so tightly with the learning management system is really what was attractive about it. So there are heaps of online community bits of software, but they're about, I don't know, photo sharing about dogs that dance or something. You know, you could start a community about any of those things. And if you want to start one of those communities, sorry Richard, don't use Totara Social. But if you're wanting a community that links in with your learning and increasingly have those tight communications, that's kind of what we saw, and we're hoping that development journey continues and gather it will. Adobe Connect, I know somebody else has got an integration with that. That's been really key. One of our biggest things has been webinars, and we find that a fantastic way of interacting, having people be able to flow in and out through that, have the learning all tracked, have people be able to be tracked through the website. Things that don't do what we want, we build it on the website and then pipe it somewhere else. So blogs and Totara Social aren't what we wanted, so we actually publish the blogs as outward facing, helps with search engine optimization, but then we can RSS feed them back into Totara Social, so they're still existing within the closed environment as well, where you can comment on them. I'll go into this a little bit more. But so, lots of stuff. I thought maybe I should talk about a case study, which has been probably our most exciting case study, because it's, although we do a range of courses and lots of different providers, this has been the most interesting one that does all the stuff we want. So it's integrating an online community, e-learning modules, and webinars, and so users are flowing constantly in between all those different learning objects with the community at the centre. So Black Dog, as I said, is a big mental health charity in Australia. They won a large e-mental health tender with a consortium of universities. And it was meant to go for 2 years, commencing in 2014. It's been going very well. The government seems to be happy with the outcomes, and so it's been extended. They also seem to be happy with what we've been doing, so they've actually extended us doing social. So that's, glad about that. Just a couple of the numbers there. I'm never quite sure how well that projects. We've had about 1,200 learners go through something with them, about 800 members in the community now. They started off with maybe 100 or 200 members who are GPs on their list, maybe another 100 or so psychologists. So they've helped by sitting within Midclass' overall community of 10,000 GPs and other learners. Run about 18 webinars and had about 2,500 completions. Interestingly, only about 60% of them are live, so we're finding people do want to go and watch these webinars on demand. In terms of one of those previous things I mentioned about usefulness and maximising value. All of these things are credit for CPD points. So all the webinars and all the learning modules, they're all points accredited for nurses and psychologists and GPs. We can't track the social interactions yet, and that's something that we're having an ongoing discussion with Totara about, and I think that's really important. We're really interested in things like not only tracking it within social, ultimately building in XAPI and being able to track everything that the user's doing that's contributing towards this learning. But in this case, they've had about 700 completions of the modules, and it's just lovely to get some comments back. Some of them, to be fair, we're forcing them to make some comments. So one of the ways of generating content is you have this online environment, and then because you've done a webinar, you now flow through to an e-learning module. You do the module, but to complete it and get your certification, you have to do some kind of reflective piece. The reflective piece happens to rest within the community. So you do something in the community, people read that, they go, gee, that was nice, I might go and look at that module. Oh, hang on, there's a webinar on that. And so you get people cycling through your content. And they've got a facilitator who is a GP who has some hours funded under the grant to be sitting there going, yeah, that was a great comment, and had you thought of another resource, and putting out some blogs. So sustainability has been there. People have said it's their best online learning exercise. We're very happy to hear that. And the course is engrossing and watchable. Lovely to hear when people say it's their first online course but not their last. So just a little bit of a look at what we've done with Totara Social. So that you come into the eMental Health homepage, and we've put social as the homepage for the learning. I'm not sure how much you can see on there. All the standard items, blogs being fed in from the website, activity streams, forum posts. But one of the things we've worked really hard on is just the look and feel and the ongoing navigation. This is not 2 systems, it's not 7 systems, it's not really from a user's point of view. They're coming through and they're flowing into a system which does different things. So the left-hand nav has been our way around that at the moment. You can, on the left-hand arrow, you can see you can scroll up and you can hit Midclass communities. You can flow on that right-hand block. You can see a number of communities that you might want to be part of. Some of them are private shared, some are not visible, some you can access, some you have to wait for permission. You might go to Learning Home, you might go and search for some other courses. Over on the right-hand nav, we've just put a block there so that you can click on there and find more education. Something that we're hoping to see there at some point is that actually even more tightly integrated. So we know you're in mental health and you're part of an audience, with a lot of audience-based theming is in here. So these are other courses that you may be interested in, which are now being produced out of the LMS. So that's another thing on our very long feature list, which we keep on adding. Sorry, but we're having good conversations about that, about where that's going. Once again, you flow into a more formal piece. You land on a course page. This is about a webinar recording. You click through. All users are actually verified through the Australian APRA database. So actually, before you can join our website, it asks you for your medical registration numbers, which polls the government databases. So there's a sense of security that you are in this system, and you've been through some kind of verification, although no verification is perfect. The other thing I want to comment on, and once again, this is something that the tech team has worked very hard on, and Andrew has worked very hard on for a long period of time, and I've seen some great examples here today as well. Just that look and feel, and it feeling fresh and feeling nice. Even if it's not as easy to use as it could be, it looks easy to use, which is always a great start. So that overall appeal has really helped us. We've found a lot of good feedback. We've found a lot of people coming to the site and saying, actually, that look and feel and the fact that it looks like somewhere I want to be to learn is something that's been very powerful. It's just a shot of the catalogue, which we've been through a redevelopment of the catalogue plugin, which is searchable in tile format and easy enrolls, but gives hopefully enough snapshot of the information. Although that talk before, I was there thinking I was a coward. I didn't put up my hand. We don't maybe put enough course information before you hit enrol, but maybe we should do a little bit more. Once again, just the look and feel of it, trying to keep it clean. This is just to remind me once again about the audience, using lots of audiences. So we have this overall community with different interest groups, but they're seeing different things based on who they are, so they're seeing different courses appear on their homepage as easy blocks just to make it easy to navigate into, because a lot of the learners in the lifelong CME health education space, they're drifting in and out of lots of things, so they're not your learners that you can force them through gateways. It's got to be pretty easy as to, oh, here's the one button that I've got to press because that's the course that I'm doing at the moment. So we've got this concept of overall Midclass communities. So the concept really is that Midclass communities is an ever-growing database of health professionals. They might be a member of a whole different number of communities. Some of them might be communities we start, so we run some for exam preparation to help GPs pass their final exams. They might be one on GP training that we're starting, which is for trainers and educators to get together and collaborate. Might be black dogs, so external providers who feel it's useful to camp within that overall environment, and they benefit from our users and we benefit from their users and their content. But the concept is it's a lifelong journey as well. You know, that's what, and once again, the key to social, they're having some formal knowledge through CPD modules, maybe progressing towards a short course or a certificate, but they're moving back in and out of social. They're going ongoing peer interactions, and hopefully they're actually reflecting on the things they've learnt. We've all seen those nice graphs on you learn something now, but you then do a reinforcement in a week and in a few weeks. Well, actually, if you're having ongoing threads going and somebody else is posting something and somebody's commenting something that you've learnt or is of interest, they're actually reinforcements that are happening as opposed to a formal, now it is time to reflect on your thing because it is 3 weeks post your last session. It's another way of approaching it. We're at take-home messages. Oh, how quick was that? I thought we've tried to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. I've tried to give you a quick cook's tour of a little bit of the research and the background where we came from, a little bit of the technical and a little bit of the business stuff. I've been doing this for years, and so I could quite happily just talk all afternoon about this stuff so we could settle in for a really nice long chat. But there's tea waiting. So maybe some take-homes that I'd like to leave you with is there's a big challenge on at the moment, and there's the real opportunity for some global health improvement. Primary care systems matter, they work, they're cheap and they're effective, but they're going to require a huge training input to make them work. A potential solution for that, online e-learning should be way up there in terms of ways of helping to achieve this, and social learning, particularly to get this tacit, informal know-how knowledge sharing is going to be really key. An even more formalised concept of social learning, which is a really broad concept, and there are lots of different ways of looking at it, is communities of practice. We've described a health framework based on the business literature, which gives some steps to things to consider when you're doing that. On the technical side, ease of use has got to be king, and integrations are really, I think, a key way to go to lower barriers for usability, and using things that are made for purpose. So Totara Social and Totara LMS that are actually driving both towards learning. I think it's really key from a business side to look at what your drivers are so that you don't gallop into this sort of social learning and then hope that you can leave it off to the side because the project's finished, because probably the thing will finish. And I think trying to figure out what the purpose and what the resourcing question is within the organisation is really important up front. For us, it's the fact that people keep on coming, keep on wanting to learn, keep on doing more courses, and that, for us, that then creates enough value. And so I guess the last thing I'd say is that rather than having the LMS as being king and floating off to a bit of social because it's new and it's the thing, maybe consider putting social first. Thank you very much.